Good evening and welcome to our February London South East IR webinar. For those of you who don't know me, I am Donald Leggett, Head of Investor Relations. I'm your host for this evening. We're delighted to welcome 4 excellent speakers tonight, covering sectors including pharma and infectious diseases, EV batteries and the drop in the lithium price, oil and gas farm outs, and nuclear energy and uranium. We kick off our evening with Europa Oil and Gas, who have a 30% stake in Wressle. We'll be discussing expansion plans there this evening, plus Serenity and their offshore Ireland gas farm out at Inishkea. Poolbeg Pharma are here to give us an operational update on their clinical portfolio and to introduce us to a new face, David English, the Head of Business Development. URG are a sizable uranium producer developer with a North American footprint. Demand is set to exceed supply as new nuclear power plants are commissioned globally, and we think it's a sector with real growth potential. Finally, the price of lithium carbonated spodumene has peaked in November and fallen back in 2023. Resource analyst Gaius thinks the underlying story is China's dominance over battery metals resources, which puts China in the driver's seat economically. That's at 7:30 and it's well worth a listen. Each presenter has 30 minutes to speak, with 18 or so minutes to make their investment case before we take your questions and put them to the speakers. London South East is well known for its free data and moderated bulletin boards. We provide a chat board for every UK listed company, and we now offer level 2 without adverts, which we know is something many of you have been asking for. We give a warm welcome to Will Holland, CFO at Europa Oil and Gas, who joins us live this evening. AIM-listed EOP has a mixed portfolio and is producing oil onshore UK with a 30% non-operated stake in Wressle. Europa also have a 25% stake in UK offshore Serenity and are farming out part of their stake in the low-risk Irish Sea gas field in Inishkea. Will Holland, CFO, will update us on development plans across the portfolio. Welcome, Will.
Thank you, Donald. Good evening. Good to be here. I will do, yes. So thank you. I assume everyone can see my screen. Now, this is actually going to be posted up on our website at the end of this presentation. So I'll allow people to read through the disclaimer at their own leisure rather than going through it at this particular moment. So that takes me on to sort of slide 2, which is who are we? Who is Europa? Well, we are an AIM-listed oil and gas company. We have a market cap of £12 million, and we've got what we believe is a diverse portfolio of assets. Now, those assets consist of producing assets, which are onshore UK, 2 of which we operate, and are producing significant cash flows at the moment with upside development, which has already been planned, and I'll talk about that later on. These assets do generate very valuable cash flow for us. It covers our costs and allows us to reinvest that money in the ongoing development of these fields. In addition, we have appraisal assets. We have the Serenity field, which is offshore UK, which we farmed into last year and have a 25% working interest in that. And I'll talk about that. We drilled an appraisal well last year, the end of last year, and I'll talk about what the results of that appraisal well mean and how we take the asset forward from here. And then in addition, we have our gas exploration asset offshore Ireland. This is we own 100% of this, and it has some very material prospects in the license area. And we've just started a farm out process for that. So I will go into that farm out process and just explain why we think it's such an attractive asset and why we think we'll be able to attract a farming for that asset. And I'll also talk a little bit about our business development. We are actively looking for new assets. It's been our stated strategy for a number of years now that we were looking to find more appraisal style assets. And we did apply with that in mind. We did apply during the 33rd round very recently, which is now closed, and we're looking forward to hearing the results in the coming months. So moving on, first of all, onshore UK. This picture here is actually a picture of the board visiting our Wressle site. So we do make a conscious effort as a board to visit the sites, and you'll see from the board profiles, we are all oil and gas specialists, professionals, have been in the career in the industry for our entire career. So Wressle, onshore UK. Onshore UK, as I said, there are 4 sites. 2 of them we operate, first is Crosby Warren. We also operate the West Fursby field, and then we have 2 non-operating fields, Wisby 4 and Wressle. Now, with Crosby Warren and West Fursby, they provide us with very stable cash flows. The fields are in stable production and are continuing to perform. Wressle is our star asset, without a doubt. It's where the majority of our production comes from. I'll talk about it at the next slide, but this has exceeded our initial expectations when this was brought online. And we're now, as we announced at the beginning of the year in our operational update, we're about to undertake a development program on this asset with our partners there. This involves developing not only the existing infrastructure and monetizing the gas, but also for drilling some additional wells. And monetizing the gas, this is going to happen in a couple of phases. The first phase is actually using the existing gas to generate site power. So we will generate all of the power we need from micro turbines on site. That means that we won't have to rely on grid power anymore. And the second phase of that will be to install 1.75 megawatts of power generation, electricity generation, that will then connect to a local grid. And the third phase of that, when we bring on the Penistone horizon, will be a pipeline connected to a local grid. Now, what's important about this gas monetization solution is that first of all, we're monetizing a product which otherwise would be burnt as a waste product. That's not good from an environmental standpoint, but also it's not good financially either, because we would like to monetize that. So we found monetization solutions, and that actually allows us to produce more oil as a result. So revenues should kick up significantly once we get these 2 phases complete. And the second phase, the gas to wire project, we hope to be complete before the end of the first half of the year. So let's look at the Wressle field in general and the development of it and what we're talking about. So just to place everybody first, at the far left of the slide, you'll see the grey area. That's the outskirts of Scunthorpe. So we're close to Scunthorpe, and then to the north of that, you'll see the Crosby Warren field. We operate that as 100% Europa. Then, as you can see this trend, and that's quite a simplified map, but this is the Namurian carboniferous sandstones that we're mapping here. And you'll see this trend that goes from our 100% operated field at Crosby Warren all the way down the southeast towards the Briggle discovery, which is a Union Jack Egdon operated field. And in the middle there, you've got Wressle and Broughton. And that's what we're targeting. So Wressle 1 well, that's the one that's currently in production. Let me just talk about these numbers first. So all of the numbers here are from 2016. So they're quite old numbers, but they're independently audited numbers. So ERC, which is a specialist reserves auditing company, have audited these numbers. And CPR means Competent Persons Report. They provided this independent competence persons report that have given us these numbers for Wressle and for the Broughton North prospect. Now, for those of you who've been following our story, you'll know that we've been producing these fields very, very well. The Wressle well has produced well. It's gone beyond our expectations. So these numbers are out of date, and we have commissioned a new report with our partners to be conducted over this area, which will provide us with updated numbers. We hope to have those available to release in the coming months. But what the report will also contemplate, it'll contemplate the development plan as well. And this is a development plan we announced earlier in the year, but that will be a 3-well program. So two of these wells will go into the Penistone horizon. So the Wressle well is currently producing out of the Ashover grid. As you can see from these numbers, the Penistone horizon has got more than 3 times the reserves potential than the Ashover grid does. So there's 2 wells that are going to be drilled into that. One of those wells will come from the existing pad, the Wressle 1 pad, The other two will most likely have to come from a different pad further to the north. But from that pad, we can also access the Broughton North exploration well. So over the next 18 months or so, we would hope to get those 3 wells drilled. So 2 development wells, 1 exploration well. This is all subject to permitting and planning permissions, but we've already secured those for Wressle, so we have a precedent, so we expect them to be forthcoming. So exciting times. One important point to note here is that all of this capital deployment will all go towards offsetting the EPL, the Energy Profits Levy, which is also known as the windfall tax, which has been recently implemented. So by drilling these wells, the profits that we're generating in Wressle will be shielded from this tax. So that provides further value. Okay, moving on to our offshore. This is an appraisal asset. Now this picture here is of the Stena Don, which is the rig that actually drilled the appraisal well in the summer. So let's look at that field and what that meant and what we learned as a result of drilling that well. But we farmed into this opportunity. We farmed into an appraisal opportunity because the field had already been discovered. So let's place it first. The bottom right-hand part of the slide, you'll see the coastline of Scotland with Aberdeen and Fraserburgh marked there. The insert that we zoomed into, if you look where that is, it sits between 2 oil fields. It sits between the Captain oil field and the Blake oil field, Blake Tane oil field. Blake has been on production for a number of years. Tane has been discovered, but it hasn't been developed yet. We were drilling the field adjacent to Tane. The discovery well was drilled in October 2019. It found 11 foot of sand, good quality oil, excellent reservoir quality. Now, when we farmed in and drilled the appraisal well, the S2 well, as it's marked on the map there, with i3 Energy. The risk here was that the sands would not be present. This is a stratigraphic tract, so we can't see a rollover. It's difficult to establish exactly where the sands pinch out. So the risk was that these sands would have pinched out and we wouldn't have the oil wet sands. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. It was a good chance. We had about a 50-50 chance of success. So the risk-reward proposition was actually very good. But it's the oil and gas business, and sometimes they don't come in. And this one was one of those occasions where it didn't come in. So we subsequently recalibrated our subsurface model. And we said, okay, well, from what we know from drilling this well, what have we got in this field? We know that we've got a discovery well. We recalibrated our model. We know where the oil water contact is. On the insert where it says OWC 5270, that's the regional oil water contact 5270. Now you can see the black line that sort of crosses the contour lines of the structure map coming up between the S1 and the S2 well there. That's where we believe the sands pinch out. Now, in recalibrating our model, we said, actually, this looks like it's the same field as the Tane field, which is right adjacent to. So all of those wells which say 1323B, they are the Tane wells. And we now believe that we have a single field here and that Serenity is actually part of Tane, in which case we have a unitization opportunity. And now unitization is you simply, for those that don't know, you simply take the volumes of the accumulation in your license and the volumes of the accumulations in the adjoining license. You combine them together and you use those volumes as a way of determining the net interests of the partners, of each of the partners in the unitized field. And then you develop the field as a single field rather than as individual fields. Now, I'll just move on to the next slide because I recognize I'm talking to the next slide now. Our partners are operating this, i3 Energy, and we're approaching the operator of Tane, which is Repsol Sinopec, and we're in discussions with them at the moment. So let's see. Hopefully, it will be a unitization opportunity, in which case we're looking at developing the field together. If not, then we are looking at a tieback to Tane. Either way, we're looking at probably 11 to 20 million barrels in place on our side of the field. So with a 50% recovery factor, we're talking sort of 5 to 10 million barrels of oil recoverable. To us, that's a material amount, and initial production from one well development on our side, we'd probably see about 1,000 barrels of oil a day net to Europa. Moving on to Ireland. So this is a nice picture, but this is not what you would see offshore Ireland. So the field is 50 miles offshore. Any sailor will tell you that the horizon limit is 12 miles, so you wouldn't see the rig, but it's a nice picture and it looks a bit like Ireland, so we put it in there. Let's look at the detail. So here's Ireland, a map of Ireland. Over on the west coast, we have, this is where we focus in on the insert. There we have the red license, which is a Corrib field operated by Vermilion, tied back through an existing pipeline to the Bellenboy gas terminal. This then feeds the Irish network, and importantly, this is the only domestic source of gas that Ireland has. The rest of the gas comes from interconnectors from the UK. So strategically, this is a very important asset. And you say, well, what else is there around Corrib? And really, when you look at the licenses, we are the only license adjacent to it. And we have two very material prospects in there, 1.5 TCF Inishkea prospect and 800 BCF Inishkea West prospect. Now, why is it strategically important? Well, the Irish government have recently announced that they are going to install an additional 2 gigawatts of power, gas-fired power, to help with their energy demand. But where they can get that gas from? The Corrib field is in decline. They either import it from the UK or they develop it domestically. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the environmental impact later on, but there's a massive environmental impact of producing domestically versus importing, and it's a huge disparity between what the emissions associated with what they would import versus what they could produce domestically. So we started we've got we're in the first phase of this license, and we're now looking to farm it out, and we're trying to find a farm in E, and we're targeting an exploration well next year. So that once we farmed it out, and we think we've got an excellent prospect here, I'll talk about it on the next slide. Once we farmed it out, we would look to be getting a commitment to drill the well in 2024. So when we look at the field and we look at the potential of this field, I'm going to take you to the smallest part of this slide first, and that's the map of the Corrib field and the prospects next to it. It's the insert within the profile map. Now that shows the existing Corrib field, and it shows that to the northwest of that, there's the existing Corrib North discovery. It's not been developed yet. And then directly to the west of those, you're looking at Inishkea and then Inishkea West. Now, what's important about this is it's all in the same trend. This is near field exploration, still exploration, but typically exploration, you're looking at a 1 in 10 chance of success, which is why we don't typically focus on exploration. We're looking at either near field exploration or development or appraisal development. Near field exploration, that chance reduces significantly, and here we're looking at probably like a 1 in 3 chance of success. So it's the same field, it's the same horizon, sorry, not the same field, same horizon, same reservoir, same trapping mechanism, and same kitchen. So the chances are very, very good. And if they're the size that we think it is, and we get a successful discovery well on the back of a farm out, this would be very material. Now, I did talk about emissions earlier on. Down at the bottom of this slide, I say that we've had an independent assessment of the emissions associated with Inishkea, and they would be 3 kilograms per BOE. Now, bear in mind that the LNG that we import from the USA that comes into Milford Haven, that then goes through all of the pipelines into Ireland. Before it gets to Ireland, those emissions are 145 kilograms per BOE. So that's 2%. The Irish emissions will be 2% of that gas coming in from the USA. So a very environmentally friendly product. So we're very excited by this. It's an amazing prospect, and we look forward to updating the market of our progress with the farm out.
2 minutes to go, Will.
when we look at our other business development, I recognise that time is tripping on, so I'm just going to talk very quickly about this. We are looking for other opportunities. I did say we participated in the 33rd round. These numbers are from the North Sea NSTA, what was the OGA. This is their numbers, 6.4 billion barrels of discovered undeveloped resources. That's what we're chasing. The skills you need is to understand what of those barrels are good, attractive, good risk-reward barrels versus they're contingent for a reason. We think we've got those skills in-house to recognise those opportunities and then get access to them. And we hope to update the market more of those in the future. The next slide on our financial highlights, these are all in our annual report. So I'll let you look at them at your leisure, and this presentation will be on our website later on after this presentation. But the bottom line here is we're fully funded with no need for any additional equity raises for our existing portfolio, and there's plenty of additional cash generation to come from our existing capital program for 2023 and 2024 beyond that. Quickly on the board, you'll notice that everybody here is pedigree oil and gas. We've been around. I mean, although I don't talk about it, I'm actually technical myself. I was originally an engineer looking at extracting more oil from oil and gas wells. I moved away from that into financing them. But we as a board, we have a very good, diverse skill set. We're able to recognize these opportunities and then get access to these opportunities and structure a good deal, looking to drive value based on good risk-reward propositions. And in the back of our mind the whole time is ESG. It always has been. People think this is a new concept, ESG. It absolutely hasn't been. Governance has been a very strong part of the oil industry for a long time, as has the social impact to us. And we're very strong on those benefits. And environmentally, we are looking to develop hydrocarbons, domestic hydrocarbons. We're not looking to export them. We're looking for domestic supply, to supply domestic markets. So it's the shortest supply route to market possible, which is more environmentally friendly and in line with the government strategy of producing domestic hydrocarbons. So I recognise I've whizzed through the last few slides a bit. I'll finish on the picture of Wressle again, and I'll just highlight that we are on social media, on LinkedIn and on Twitter. So please follow us. We're active on that, and we'll keep you updated of news beyond what we obviously put out on the RNS service. But thank you, Donald. Hope I didn't overrun.
No, you're perfect. Okay, well, let's cut to the chase. Wressle is your star asset. What about if we start and ask you to tell me what the news flow in the coming months from Wressle is likely to be? That whole development space there.
Absolutely. So the first part of that will be the gas monetization part. So we have, and those of you who are on our LinkedIn and Twitter feeds will have noticed that the micro turbines are in place. They're just currently being commissioned. So once that commissioning process has started, then they'll come online. We'll see an uplift in our current production. We're currently producing around about 850 barrels of oil a day. That's gross production. So we'd expect to see that increase with those micro turbines coming online. The next thing you would see, planning permission is hard to determine, and environmental permitting is hard to determine, but we're going through that process. And as soon as we've got those permits in place, then we would obviously announce that as well. But then it would be the gas to wire, the 1.75 megawatts of power generation that we'll put on site and connect to a local grid, which will again increase production and then monetize that gas as well, importantly. And then towards the end of the year, once we've got the permits in place, we'll be looking to drill the first Penistone well, which will be a very material well, should come from the Wressle site. And then we'll be looking to build the pads and then do the other two wells in 2024. So a very exciting year on continued cash generation, continued profits.
Okay, and why do you see Inishkea as a game changer? Well, could you put Inishkea in context for us? That 1 in 3 chance of success into context for us?
Yeah, so this comes down to the balanced risk reward to start off with. So So we have an asset here which we think is a 1 in 3. The upside is tremendous. If you look at the value of gas in the ground, how close it is to Corinth, it's only 10 kilometers tie-in, so it's very quick to tie in a discovery into Corinth and get it into production, monetizing it. Often fields of this size can take many years before you can start to actually develop them. We think we know that once we make a discovery here, it'll be relatively quick to get this tied in. And then you look at the volumes. We've got 2 TCF of gas close to existing infrastructure, which will be on production quickly. We haven't farmed it down yet, so let's see what type of deal we can cut. But if you look at metrics, what you would expect a farm out to look like, the residual amount that we would be left with, that would be carried through the exploration well cycle for that, a success on the back of that would be a game changer for the company. The share, you'd expect to see a very material increase in share price.
Okay. Tony Nordstrom asks, is Europa in discussions with any party in regards to a farm into the Irish gas assets, even at a preliminary stage? So I thought I'd ask that at this point, given that we're discussing Inishkea.
And so we announced we've started to farm out the asset. So we've brought on a specialist company called Lab Advisors. They've been farming out oil and gas opportunities and they're very, very experienced at it. The company itself is relatively new, but the principals, the people involved in it have been doing it for many, many years, and they all come from oil and gas. So in this industry, it's a lot of it's about network and being able to understand the risk and then being able to present the risk properly. So Lab are involved in it, and they have an excellent network of people. We have a very good network ourselves, but we are including them to expand that network to make sure that we include as many people as possible that could be interested in this, so we can get the best deal we possibly can. Now we started that process in January, and yes, we have engagement already. Now it's preliminary. We're at the start of the process, so it's these processes can take several months, and we wouldn't look to close a deal probably for at least 6 months. But this we're at the beginning, and yes, there is
a data room right now.
So there's a data room open. There are people in the data room.
Great. Philip Trett asks, what are the positives shareholders can look forward to in 2023?
Well, I mean, sticking with Inishkea, I hope we will be able to announce a farm-in of that this year, and that will do a number of things. One, it'll provide a sort of a third-party acknowledgement that it's there, that it's a good quality prospect, that actually other people in the industry like it, and they like the risk reward that it represents. And then all of the other macro factors over the top of that as well. So just by achieving a farm-in, and that farm-in, we are looking for a full carry. So that means that we've got somebody who's committed to drill a well, and we will be carried to drill that well. That in itself will provide a value drive, even before we've drilled the well. Then drilling the well, that'll be the year after. But we hope to farm it down this year, which will provide the initial uptick. And then we're looking at all of the operational activity around Wressle as well, and getting the planning permissions we need, and mobilising the rig and drilling the first Penistone well. And in addition to that, we've got Serenity, and we hope to have said this is the monetization solution for Serenity. We don't know what that's going to look like yet. We're in negotiations. Let's see see how that pans out. But once we have certainty of that, announcing that to the market so people know, okay, this is going to get developed, this is how it's going to get developed, that will also drive value. A
quick question just in from Keith McDonald. Are you having difficulties getting your Inishkea license progress similar to Badero Energy, who were delayed by the DEC in Ireland?
Well, so very, very good question. We actually got approval for our extension in January. So actually, was it January or was it December? I can't remember. Sorry, but it goes through until the license goes through until January 2024. So we have recently got approval to have our extension. And I think, I can't talk about other people's assets, but for our asset, when you look at the opportunity that it provides for Ireland, and I'm calling it a strategically important asset for Ireland, because I believe it is, and I think that's why the government has said, okay, we'll grant your license. And it's a valid license. We can opt to go through the phases. So the next phase at the end of January 2024 is to opt to go into the next phase. That will automatically happen if we choose to go into the next phase.
Last question, Will. Sorry to interrupt you. The last question, let's quickly squeeze in another. I've got a couple of questions here about the share price. Do the directors believe that URG is currently undervalued? And I suppose the short version of Tim Lang's question is, can you rule out another dilutive fundraise? So you mentioned in your presentation that everything that you've got planned is fully funded. Take it away.
Yes, we are fully funded for our current operations, but we are, as I said, also we're looking for new opportunities. Now, if we find a new opportunity which we think the risk-reward proposition is good and it requires additional capital, then yes, we would come back to the market. But at the moment, there's absolutely no plans for our current development program. We've got no need to go to the market. We're fully funded for that. Ask about the share price. There is no value in this share price for the Wressle development. I don't think there's no value in our share price for Inishkea farm down. There's no value in our share price for the development of Serenity. So if you think that those things are going to happen, each of those are value drivers for our share price over the course of the next 12 months.
So you see plenty of upside, Will?
I see lots of upside. Yes, I absolutely do.
Okay, we're out of time. Will Holland, CFO at Europa Oil and Gas, you're a complete star. Thank you for sharing all that with us. That's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, Donald.
Next up, it's AIM-listed Poolbeg Pharma, the clinical stage infectious disease pharmaceutical company which operates a capital-light clinical model. Poolbeg is targeting the growing infectious disease market, and its flagship product, POLB 001, published strong results from the first clinical trial early in January, and Poolbeg believe it has the potential to become a leading severe influenza treatment. Tonight, we're delighted to be joined by CEO Jeremy Skillington, as well as Business Development VP David English. Welcome to you both.
Very nice to be here again, Donald. Good to see you.
Greetings, gentlemen, and how are you this evening? Are you coming to me live from Dublin?
We are indeed. A dark Dublin. The night's getting longer, but it's dark right now, yeah.
But we're on the sunny upside. We're looking forward to the sunlit uplands very shortly, Jeremy. Lovely. Right, now who's starting off? I understand it's you, Jeremy. You're going to...
I will start off, and I must say before I get going, I'll give the company updates going through, but I'm just delighted that number one, David English joins me here tonight, but number two, the fact that he's joined the company. He brings tremendous experience on the business development front. So again, delighted David can join tonight, and he's going to go through more of the realizing value through business development, which is a core focus, a core area of growth for Poolbeg after we've now established our pipeline. But for those not in the know, as it were, I'll go through and just give the general background to the company. We're a leading biopharma company specializing in infectious disease. We used to be focused, but we've done a few, say, deals in adjacencies that we see will be quite beneficial for shareholders, and I'll speak about those very shortly. But those who know, we plan to be a one-stop shop for pharma who look for programs to in-license. So we're going to provide a pipeline for pharma to add to their own internal pipelines to drive their programs forward. We spun out of our colleagues at hVivo, who are, a respiratory viral focused clinical trials company, spinning out in 2021. We raised 25 million, and we're fully funded. I know we said in the last call that we have funding to keep us going to get us to deal readiness, let's say deal transactions. So again, we run clinical trials. We're clinical trial focused, and as you see, a lot of these clinical trials can be run very, very quickly, very cost efficiently. So we'll talk about those later on. But targeting large addressable markets even beyond infectious diseases, and I'll speak about our cancer programs and our diabetes and obesity programs later on. but in brief. But so again, early out-licensing is the goal. So we're looking to generate early human clinical data and then begin partnering with pharma. And those conversations are already started and ongoing. So and it's all data-driven. And again, we'll talk about that later on. So again, we've got a very nice pipeline of products which we're rapidly advancing, as I say, getting into the clinical settings. Just to highlight a few here, I'm going to focus today on POLB 001 in particular, and then the 2 AI programs. I know there's been a lot of questions around those later on, but as you'll see from POLB 001, we started in the severe influenza treatment setting, and then branching out into CAR T-cell therapy, which is a new wave of treatments for cancer, where side effects have these cytokine storms or hypercytokine that we believe POLB 001 will play a role. And I'll talk about that later on. Exciting for the company is the completion late last year, of our LPS challenge trial. So this, again, as I say, is getting human clinical data. So I'll talk about, beginning out-licensing discussions there. And then, as I say, the progression that we've made with the AI programs, with lab-based validations already beginning for RSP programs. And then similarly, waiting patiently, having good discussions with our colleagues at Cytoreason about the outputs from the analysis of the influenza data. And again, flagging and highlighting these are unique data sets. Nobody else has those. So what comes out of this will be unique to Poolbeg, which we will fully own and then be ready for partnering. So thanks, David. On the next slide, then, I just want to talk about POLB 001. Again, a potential blockbuster immunomodulator. And I will say this, that from a severe influenza standpoint, we are driving towards targeting the immune response to the virus. Again, to be clear, not the virus specifically itself. There are antivirals out there that are, needed in the first 48 hours post symptoms, but anything beyond those 48 hours, there's nothing in there for treatment, particularly in the severe influenza setting. As you said, we could go beyond. So delighted to have completed our trial last year, looking at the very early data. We were happy to see some of the outputs. And as I say, our statisticians and our clinicians are currently digging into the very large data set. Last week, we got a document over from our clinical trial side of over 500 pages that we're wading through, looking at all of the endpoints on that. So again, very excited what we're seeing so far. And of course, we'll update the market on the outputs from that. And so, we announced it's very early data, but as I say, we're building towards that. On the second front, and I know, Donald, we presented, sorry, Dave, if on the second front, I know that, Donald, we presented to you back in November, and these are all new entities where we have built out, focusing in on POLB 001 in oncology. So again, we know in this CAR T setting that there's issues around adverse events. So we believe our drug can play a role here. So we file some critical intellectual property to protect these discoveries or inventions, let's say back in January. I'll talk about that a little bit shortly. So moving on, I want to talk about the reason why we feel that POLB 001 will have a role to play across many different diseases. I think this is a key slide to explain that. Again, when we look at P38, which is the target, this is a master regulator of the immune response. And we know that in certain diseases, this goes awry. It gets kind of overactivated, you could say, and causes distress and various sequelae where you have downstream tissue damage. So you activate the immune cell, and say it's always on patrol. It's always looking for foreign invaders or indeed internal tissue or injury damage, and then mops those up. And it causes, point 2 there, this kind of cytokine secretion, which is normally, that happens in a normal setting. And this triggers more immune activation and then more cytokine release. And then what happens is this downward spiral where you're getting this breakdown of tissue and organs because there's too many cytokines present. So what we feel that using POLB 001, we know as a master regulator, on the next click, will block that, will block this continuous activation of cytokine storm. So we feel that we've got a very exciting drug here to go, not just on the left-hand side, severe influenza, where again, data generated by our colleagues at hVIVO identified P38 to be a key driver of that progression from mild, moderate influenza driven by the virus into severe influenza, where, as you see in point 5 here, is where you have this breakdown of lung tissue and vascular tissue, and you ultimately have a certain portion of patients succumbing to death. So we know that blocking POLB 001 should have a role to play in blocking that. So, and again, other viral infections, there's great potential here as well. I know we're kind of out the other end of the COVID pandemic, but we know there's this cytokine storm issue where the virus triggers the immune system and then you have downstream damage. So there's other aspects as well. And the bottom one here, the third one, cell therapy. And again, this new CAR T therapy, as I say, is an interesting, fascinating area, which I'll speak to. But again, there are these adverse events where the immune system is triggered. You want to trigger the immune system to kill the cancer cells, but it goes beyond what's required and causes damage to the other tissue. And this is of concern. So we see there's a window of opportunity here for POLB 001. So I want to talk briefly about the clinical trial that we've just finished, this LPS challenge. And the LPS is a modulator of the immune or inflammatory response. And we liken it to mimic what happens in an influenza, an infection, or a bacterial infection, for example. So I won't talk through the design itself. I've done that several times before. But essentially, we're looking at 3 different doses of POLB 001 to identify which one is most efficacious in this setting. And I think the initial review that we've seen, again, happily, and this kind of backs up, let's say, previous knowledge, was that it was safe and well tolerated. Again, very important aspect from the clinical trial, that there's no undue side effects in the patients. So we deemed the trial itself to be successful. As I said, we're digging into the lower levels of the data and are very happy what we're seeing so far. We're seeing a marked reduction in both local and systemic inflammatory response. So again, we've given this LPS challenge, under the skin intradermally, and we're seeing that we're blocking that localized response as well as systemic. So this is, again, delighted to see that. We know P38 now is playing a significant role in driving the inflammatory response, and we're blocking that. We're also seeing, quite interestingly, a clear dose-response relationship. What comes out of this trial, we want to understand what dose that we give in the further trials downstream, when we partner the program, and understanding what dose we need to give for severe influenza, for example, or CRS, for example. So again, we're getting a better understanding of the drug and how it's taken in humans, and how to, so the dose downstream will be identified. And again, well tolerated, no serious adverse events. And we will say the full data read about clinical report that will come in Q2, very, very shortly, essentially in Q2. But we're working towards giving a updated of the deeper dive into the data. So very excited about that. So on the next slide, then I'll talk about CAR T. Again, a little bit different from the infectious disease, but we know that these kind of inflammatory responses occur in up to 95% of patients that get CAR Ts. And again, a new wave of cancer treatments that are focused on leukemia and lymphoma patients. There is designs to move this into solid tumors as well to have effects there. But what we know what happens is that when you activate what's called the T cells, they again activate their local the immune responses, immune cells, driving cytokines. And again, you're having this downward spiral that are serious adverse events with these patients. So we want to block that. And we believe that POLB 001 has a role to play here. So we hope to, we're initiating clinical trial activities in that. And given that we already have phase 1 data from POLB 001, we can move easily quickly into a clinical setting there. So there are current treatments out there that are looking at steroids, which again is a blunt approach. Anti-interleukin 6, which again, one of these cytokines that are only targeting one cytokine. We feel that POLB 001 can target a lot more, and then focusing on IL-1, a similar approach used off-label. So again, a window of opportunity here for a small molecule pill rather than an injection of antibodies or biologics. And I'll wrap up very quickly just to talk a little bit about our 2 AI programs. Again, very excited how we've moved these forward so rapidly. A lot of time, target discovery, even the drug discovery takes many, many years. And as you see from the bottom of this page here, from signing a deal with 1-3 to analyze our RSV data back in February, by December, we had identified drug candidates that now are moving into lab-based validation. So excited about that. At the top is just identifying there's certain genes that are expressed as the disease progresses. And again, we're identifying some gene expression here that hasn't been done before, hasn't been identified before. So very novel. And then finally, Cytoreason, fantastic partners to work with. They work with the larger biotech companies around Pfizer, Roche, and Merck and Sanofi. But they too are working towards identifying very novel, very exciting targets that nobody else has. Some great discussions recently, which David will talk about, with farmers being interested in this data and the outputs from this data. And we'll have full outputs from Cytoreason in Q2 this year. And again, looking for products then to in-license to move forward. So very exciting programs, and fantastic for Poolbeg to have moved these forward so rapidly. So that's the general background, the state of play for a couple of our programs. And what I'll do now, I'll pass it on to David to give us an update. Again, releasing value through BD, a very important component. And again, delighted David's on board with us. Thanks, David.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I probably have 7 or 8 slides. I'll keep them relatively prompt based on our timing to date. But what I'm going to cover is 4 things. The first thing I'm going to cover is our operating model. Jeremy may have shared it in the past, but just to refresh for people. The second thing I'm going to cover is why do we partner when we partner. The third is we'll talk about two markets of focus for us, not our only areas of focus, but two specifically of focus for this call, influenza and RSV. And then I'll talk a little bit around out-licensing and how we're progressing there. So this is a slide highlighting our general operating model. What we're trying to do in essence is accelerate the traditional infectious disease R&D development model, de-risking programs that we can then partner upstream with pharmaceutical companies who they can kind of then process the drug and bring it forward at scale and get the medicines to patients quicker. It's essentially then built on 4 steps. The first is identifying high potential opportunities, i.e. finding problems which we can uniquely solve. I headed up search and evaluation efforts at a pharma company prior to this, so we're well versed in trying to place good bests. I think the second piece then is we're looking to get early meaningful data. We're uniquely positioned to do that due to the fact that we spun out of a human challenge trial company. So we're able to get human challenge data early to de-risk the program. We then look to partner with biotech or pharma at a kind of a pre-phase 2 stage. And then we will reinvest any funds from those deals and structures back into the pipeline. So the question that comes up a lot, or what I've seen to date, is why are we going pre-phase 2? So on the left panel, this is some data I found based on a report from JP Morgan that looks at the type of in-licensing deals big pharma are doing. In many ways, I think our operating model has been ahead of the curve, and we're now seeing in the ecosystem that's kind of catching up. The punchline here is that over 90% of in-licensing deals from pharma companies were pre-phase 2 in 2022. That data is out until Q3. So there is a narrative there, and it very much aligns with our approach. So that is a positive thing for us to see, where we can have complementary skill sets work together to ultimately bring these medicines to patients. Let's start about the markets themselves. So I'll talk briefly around influenza and then RSV, and then we'll go to the out-licensing section. So influenza itself, a lot of therapies out there led by Tamiflu, as most people know, but these are only approved for acute, uncomplicated influenza. So 48 hours after symptoms. So mild, moderate disease. It's about a $2 billion market. Tamiflu is half of that, more or less. But there are a lot of challenges out there on the healthcare system. The burden of flu for the hospital system in the US alone is $11 billion. You'll see 2 quotes on this slide. One is from the NIH and one is from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, just highlighting the need to be able to manage those severe patients, those patients that are in hospital. And currently there's no approved therapies for those. So we talk about severe influenza itself. If you take influenza, 1 billion cases per year, per annum, 3 to 5 million are severe influenza. Maybe the number is actually undervalued. It can be up to 10 million, and about 650,000 deaths per annum. So this is a challenge. Risk factors are obesity, pregnancy, and any kind of renal or heart disease. You're 8 times more likely to have a stroke if you've got severe influenza or influenza in general, and you're 6 times more likely to have some other cardiovascular challenges. In terms of treatment right now, very limited options. So long duration antivirals, although not approved, are used, and then people are moved on to ventilators. So there is a significant gap here, and we think we're able to address this unmet need and drastically improve the standard of care. Clinical data will drive payer discussions will drive pricing will drive overall value. So I think this is a unique program that we can certainly see advancing towards an indication within, or approval within, severe influenza. Jeremy also highlighted, though, that we are looking at adjacencies. When the company IPO'd summer 2021, the organization has looked at areas where hyperinflammatory reactions happen and where we can try and address some unmet needs or associated toxicities with that. Severe influenza is what we've led with from an indication perspective, but we've also looked at CAR-T. So these are cancer cell treatments that Jeremy spoke to earlier with that nice graphic. And we think that we have a patent filed, I think it was January this year, in that indication. But we will look beyond that. It's about ultimately liberating the true value of the molecule. So I think it's very exciting that we have preclinical phase 1 and upcoming LPS data in severe influenza, and also we're moving in parallel with oncology and specifically CAR-T therapy. Before we talk about RSV, I know Jeremy then had mentioned AI. There's always a lot of noise about AI. When I think about our AI work, it isn't machine learning. So machine learning to me is faster computers. What we're actually doing is taking information and driving real unique insights, mapping in some cases the course of disease from initiation through to completion. And we use our unique data sets to do that. I have three images, kind of, or blocks of images on this slide. So the top left is a narrative of what we're trying to do. And the analogy that I've put here is we're trying to identify targets. That's like finding locks for new doors in a disease, screening existing molecules. That might be checking to see what keys are out there that can kind of unlock that challenge. And then finally, looking at compounds or designing the perfect key to solve the problem. So that's a challenge for society. The challenge for the AI providers is actually a lot of the data they get is quite disparate, quite patchy. We have challenge data that is extremely dense and robust. We have 6 gigs of data per patient. This is huge. This is magnitudes above what you would get in the public system. So we're able to take this data, augment it with publicly available literature, and then try and draw meaningful insights with programs around this, drug targets, etc. 2 collaborations, one with 13 Biotech. We have some lab-based validation work ongoing there. And then with CytoReason, we have some work with, again, outputs expected in the first half of this year. So pretty exciting. Because we've talked about influenza, let me just shoot to RSV itself. When you think about respiratory infections, what people worry about are lower respiratory infections. They're a top 5 global killer. And unfortunately, a lot of these respiratory infections have no treatments. You will know influenza is a respiratory infection, but there are 85% are outside of influenza. Influenza specifically only represents 15% of these issues. RSV has come up in the news a bit. It's potentially, particularly a challenge for the elderly and children. So the pediatric market and the older population, about 400,000 hospitalizations in the US. And it's the #1 leading cause of hospitalization in new infants. The fact that we're able to take unique data, draw insights in novel targets, so new genes that haven't been looked at by other pharma companies before, we can probably help in this global fight within this indication. It is also an indication that's getting a lot of interest from big pharma. There are some late-stage vaccine programs, phase 3 and beyond, and data here that I'm sharing from Singer Capital is estimating peak sales in the region of $1.5 to $2 billion. So again, blockbuster potential for unique therapies within this space. Finally, on the out-licensing part, as I said, we look to partner pre-phase 2. We think about partners that have complementary skill sets, whether that's market access competencies, commercial competencies, and so on and so forth. And we're open to different types of deals, both global deals or strategic regional deals, and also the structure where we think through with a given partner. So yeah, we're actively having conversations with companies, and I think it'll be an exciting year ahead for us. I think that's probably all I have to say at the time we've got left. But Jeremy, I might hand it over to you for the closing summary slide, if you'd like.
Thank you, David. A bit of a whirlwind, but I think it's good to kind of update. As I say, having David on board is fantastic. But I won't dwell on this too long, Donald, but just flag top left the near-term value inflection points. As I said, the readout from our LPS challenge study pending very, very soon. Lab-based validation, validating these drugs for RSV. Again, looking at the outputs from influenza, again, unique, just to emphasize that what we'll have, nobody else will have. So obviously we'll be in demand, and discussions ongoing with that. And then the other programs, they're touching upon them, that we've got our oral vaccine is funded from the Irish government, thankfully ready to kick off there. Having clinical trial by the end of the year for oral GLP-1. And then as expanding into oncology. So again, getting that early human clinical data is key to us. So I will leave, as I say, I won't carry the other 3. I know we've talked about these before, but very exciting time for the company. We've built a fantastic foundation, great team to drive things forward. And again, leaving time for questions. Again, appreciate people attending tonight on a Tuesday evening, but happy to take questions. And again, exciting time for the company and a bright future.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. That was fantastic. You packed a heck of a lot in there, that's for sure.
There is a lot going on, Donald. There's a lot going on. And again, it's great to kind of give these updates because, we're working away in the offices, but it's nice to kind of get out there and share.
It's always good to relate to, feedback to the investors. That's what keeps them happy. tell me a little bit more about the many different diseases that you're targeting with POLB 001. I presume a major target for you must be the oncology aspects. Is it possible to give me more detail as to what might be coming out of, you've given us the initial LPS challenge trial data.
Yeah.
What might be to come? Is it possible to sort of gaze into the future a little bit for us?
It's a good way to look at it. I mean, there's one way to look at that from 001. We know it's been in phase 1 before with healthy volunteers that is safe and well tolerated. Now we have this new data, the LPS challenge data, as I say, that we're analysing. Very happy with what we're seeing. I think when we dig into the details, that we'll announce that, where we know that this can be applied to other diseases where there's that inflammatory response. As I say, we gave the example, LPS is a surrogate for other inflammatory responses, including severe influenza, but including the response from CAR-T. And as I say, CAR-T is just a wonderful new technology where you're engineering patients' T cells, introducing them or reintroducing them back in to go kill cancer. But what it does in the meantime, it kind of activates other immune cells that then you have these side effects of this cytokine storm. And it happens in a lot of patients. So it's kind of an unwelcome side effect. So we think a complementary, kind of a combination of a CAR-T treatment with POLB 001 will maintain the efficacy of the CAR-T treatments, but also reduce these side effects. So we think that there's a market there for that there'll be a demand to kind of, again, these patients are in a tough situation, so we don't want to make it any worse. So very excited about that. But again, looking beyond that to seeing where else we can apply POLB 001, because I've said many times before, but if you've got what pharma like to see from a partnering standpoint is one drug that works in many different diseases. And we feel that hitting P38 as a target, again, validated target in the inflammatory space will be very exciting for pharma. And now that we have this clinical data to back up our statements, I think that'll be exciting for them.
Okay, quick question for David here. When it comes to out licensing POLB 001, would you do one licensing deal across all these different uses?
Good question.
Or several out licensing deals to different people?
Typically, yes, good question. Typically what people do is they do one broad deal, but you can split indications. It just depends. Typically you will find that a company will want, particularly if they're sizable, so if they're a larger pharma, they have therapeutic expertise across a lot of areas. So they want to potentially test a molecule across a number of indications. But I would be confident even if we just focused on one of these, whether it was severe influenza or oncology or CAR-T specifically, I think they're substantial markets. So we had a slide showing the size of the CAR-T market, and then, severe influenza, there is no approved treatment. There are, 5 million hospitalizations at least. It's not very hard to back into why this would be a blockbuster drug, assuming, very basic pricing. So, yeah.
Do you have any numbers in your head as to what sort of out licensing deal you might be looking for, as to how much money you would be happy with coming back in? Or is that a slightly cheeky question to ask?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. It's one you always expect, right? It's probably about the total value of the molecule. We will work with companies to see what the optimal structure is, and that's always a conversation between two parties. The finances are really important, but also the right type of partner. When I talk about the right type of partner, having the infrastructure to really have a massive sales force globally, being able to have the market access support to get good pricing on the program, having the clinical expertise, and it's a match of those skill sets. Obviously, our operating model is based on the fact that we do want a healthy upfront, and competitive tension is always good, but that's just part of the overall discussion and something that we're always keeping top of mind as we are talking to partners.
Now, you're talking to partners. Is it possible to sort of give us an insight into where exactly you've got to so far?
Sure.
I think you're talking to.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think I joined maybe late September. We've met at a number of the partnering conferences, JP Morgan and the others, and we are actively having discussions with companies. So I can't probably share too much, but what I can share, there's a lot of positivity around the operating model, firstly, and then secondly, particularly 001 with this new data reading out soon. So we're having a lot of positive preliminary discussions. I couldn't give you a timing on anything, obviously, but I think it'll be a constructive year ahead. Let's just say it that way.
You're going to be busy.
Diplomatic.
Yeah, one way or the other.
Fantastic. Okay, back to Jeremy.
Yeah.
Let's talk to you about avian flu. We've seen a lot about avian flu in the news recently. You've talked about many different uses for POLB 001. Could you see it being used as a treatment should it move into humans?
Yeah, I mean, that's you see the headlines and you're worried. We've learned lessons, from COVID-19, which is to take these things very seriously, very early on.
Very true.
Yeah, we've always said POLB 001 would be kind of involved in pandemic preparation. It's a shelf-stable product, shelf-stable asset, so we know it'll be there, ready for the next one to come through. The key thing to flag again, as David kind of mentioned, is that this is kind of strain agnostic. It doesn't matter what strain of virus it is. Once you get that inflammatory response, our drug will work. So it doesn't matter. I mean, the avian flu is a H5N1 that they're talking about. It's kind of emerging right now, but irrespective of what strain it is, it's the immune responses that we're tackling. So yes, it could be, again, we hope that, this is not an ex-pandemic, or kind of advice. We work very closely with Professor Derek Gilroy, who was at our Capital Markets Day, commenting on that, the frequency of these pandemics is actually increasing over time. So we have to be better prepared. So we think POLB 001 can play a role here if need be.
Okay. You didn't mention it in your presentation, Jeremy, but I know you're excited about the potential for the oral GLP-1. So this is a bit of a handbrake turn here, but oral GLP-1 program. Can you tell us a wee bit more about GLP-1?
Handbrake turn, I like that, Donald. Yeah, we saw it as an adjacency. We had an existing collaboration with colleagues at Anabio around oral vaccines, and they were establishing a program at oral GLP-1. And we saw that there was a good, as I say, synergy between their technology and our expertise. And recent presentation, we had Professor Brendan Buckley, who he's worked in metabolic diseases all his life, and he's very excited about this program. Most diabetics, they get an injection in their arm, but if you could swap that out for an oral drug, that's fantastic. So we're establishing. Actually, I had a call earlier on today with our proposed clinical trial site. Again, we see this as a very rapid approach where we can get data coming out from, say, upwards of 18 patients that we'll investigate. And again, moving on to manufacturing and have data by the end of the year. But again, it's one of these things. If you get positive data from a small clinical trial, early human data, then we know that the pharmas in the GLP-1 space, in the injectable GLP-1 space, will be looking to substitute those with an oral product. So we'd be very excited about that. So again, we'll have rapid. The plan is before the end of the year to have that clinical data in hand from oral GLP-1. Yeah, very excited about that.
Okay, Jeremy, final question. Let's wrap up the news flow that you can expect to the end of the year. You're talking end of year. Let's say news flow to the end of the year. What can we expect?
Yeah, I just kind of touched upon it, but the next key step is, like, as I say, the data set, the more comprehensive data set, let's say, from the LPS challenge trial, which again, David mentioned, will be that springboard for the deeper pharma discussions. So that's pending. As I say, as I write, there was emails going back and forth from statisticians and clinicians, etc. So the real, as I say, digging into that data. So that's the exciting one. And then pushing forward with the AI programs. As I said, the validation from the 1-3, that'll be, that's all kind of in vitro testing. So that'll be relatively rapid, and very excited with our side of reason discussions to see what targets they come out with from this influenza data. And we're incredibly busy. You're right. We're looking again beyond this for more grant applications, pushing other programs forward. As I say, the oral vaccine kicking off. So it'll be a very busy year for Poolbeg, and again, very focused on driving growth, driving value. Obviously, returning, getting excitement around the share price. Again, we're of late we've seen kind of the uptick of late, even against kind of market trade winds, as it were. But we want to keep that going. As I say, we're excited where we're going. We've excited what we've built, and obviously, with David on board now, executing from a deal front, I think we've got all the pieces in place.
Overall, you see it as a positive year ahead.
Absolutely. Even in a kind of a whole market down year last year, we kind of maintained we did well. And I think it's just executing on a plan, executing on a strategy, and staying focused. And I think we've done a good job of that thus far. And again, it's all data driven. This industry is data driven, and once we have data in hand, that's what pharma gets excited about. So we'll have numerous pieces of data this year to be in discussions with. So again, a busy and exciting year. This is what we get out of bed for. There's patients that need our help, and obviously we want to get our products to the bedside.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for joining us. That's Jeremy Skillington, CEO at Poolbeg Pharma, and joined by his colleague. Poolbeg wanted to get David English in front of you, and we've just done that. David English, VP Business Development at Poolbeg Pharma. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Appreciate it, Donald. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
URG, New York Stock Exchange listed URG is a leading North American uranium mining company with a strong track record of producing low-cost uranium. URG is an in-situ uranium recovery specialist. You'll learn about that in a moment, and has previously produced and packaged approximately 2.7 million pounds of U3O8 from Lost Creek in south-central Wyoming and is in the process of obtaining remaining authorizations to expand Lost Creek. At the company's second in-situ recovery uranium facility at Shirley Basin in Wyoming, URG has all major permits and authorization in place to begin construction. Now, John just told me that Wyoming is approximately the size of Great Britain. I wasn't surprised, but it is very big. Welcome, John.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to tell our story.
John, it's fantastic. We're delighted to have you on board, and take it away. Tell us the company story.
No, sounds good. Glad to jump in and tell you a little bit about the company. And I'm located right now in Casper, Wyoming, which is where our operations headquarters is at. The mine site is a couple of hours west of town, and I'll just pull up a presentation here for me. And we always like to talk about Lost Creek first because it is our operating site, and it's been up and running for over 9 years now. And as you indicated, we've produced nearly 3 million pounds of uranium since that time. So it's been a great producer. We've had some great profitable quarters from that mine, and really is our flagship. And I'll talk about our second flagship as well. The obligatory disclaimer, I might make some forward-looking comments during the presentation. But we have recently made a decision to ramp up production at Lost Creek. We had allowed production to decline back starting in 2020 because market conditions were very poor, but the price of uranium has begun to come around due to geopolitics and due to pressures from additional demand from the nuclear fuel cycle. So we're excited to announce that. And we have drillers out there right now installing wells at the in-situ mine. We've been doing a lot of hiring, bringing people on, doing training. And within a few weeks now, we will have meaningful flow running through the processing plant and producing pounds to feed into contracts. We've got a great resource at Lost Creek, 11.9 million pounds of measured and indicated resources, an additional 6 million pounds of inferred, and a lot of opportunity to grow that resource because there are a lot of areas, and I'll show a map a little bit later, where there is, we've not done a lot of exploration in some areas of the property. So we believe we've got a good opportunity there. Certainly every time we have gone out and explored the property, we find more pounds, and our average discovery cost is about 50 cents a pound. So we've been producing for quite some time. We still have a mine life of 14 years left at that property. The license that we have for the well field allows us to produce 1.2 million pounds per year. The processing plant that is fully constructed is licensed at 2.2 million pounds per year. And the delta between the 1.2 from the mine and the 2.2 from the processing plant allows us to toll process from other facilities, whether that be our own facilities in the region or from competitors in the region. And that brings me to our next flagship property. It's also in Wyoming and an in-situ facility, and that's called Shirley Basin. It's just south of where I'm sitting right now. And we have all the major permits in hand for that operation. We have not made a decision yet to ramp up production, but when we do, we believe we can build it out in a time period of about 18 to 24 months and get it ramped up as well during that time period. So fairly short amount of time to be able to ramp it up. And the capital expenditure to build it out, we're only looking at about $30 to $35 million to build out that facility and to ramp it up. We have a good resource there of 8.8 million pounds of measured and indicated resources. I would note there that this is a project that's been heavily drilled, and we have all of the historic data. We don't need to do any more exploration or development drilling here. We can go straight away into production once we decide to pull the trigger and produce there. But backing away from our two flagship properties to talk a little bit more about the company, we're proud to announce that we've sold some of our inventory to the Department of Energy very recently. We got a very good sales price on that, exceeding $64 a pound. So just a couple of weeks ago, we got our paycheck from the government, $6.4 million. So we were very glad to have that brought in. We still have a remaining inventory of 224,000 pounds. We also have been signing some long-term sales contracts with large utilities and nuclear companies globally. And we've been able to layer in sales contracts of 600,000 pounds per year It starts off at 200,000 pounds of production this year, but it goes up to 600,000 pounds of production each year thereafter. We are an in situ mining company. And what that means is we don't use conventional methodologies to recover the ore. Instead, we install water wells into the ore body, and we inject water, baking soda, and oxygen, and that dissolves the uranium, and we simply pump it to the surface from an adjacent well. So the disturbance from that type of mining is very small. And when we get done mining, we will return the land back to its original use, and you won't even be able to tell we were there. But moving away from the company just for a bit, we'll talk a little bit about the nuclear investing thesis. Certainly, there's a lot going on right now globally in that regard. But really, things got kicked off a few years ago when people began to realize that if we're going to go carbon free, renewables are fantastic, but we really need reliable base load power that can be on when the wind doesn't blow and when the sun goes down. And so that really began to foster a lot more interest in the nuclear space. And a lot of investment companies started to jump in as that came about. The World Nuclear Association is projecting significant continued growth in the industry. It's important to note that that study that the World Nuclear Association did was pre-invasion of Ukraine. Since the invasion of Ukraine, there are a lot of European countries that are saying, hey, we're not going to be reliant on Russian natural gas anymore. We've got to find a different solution. And a lot of countries now are turning toward nuclear. So we believe when the WNA does their next study, which will be September of next year, that the results are going to be even more favorable, and we're going to see more year-over-year growth at an expanding rate. We're also looking at additional uses of nuclear power through small modular reactors and also through hydrogen production, and those should not be ignored in the midterm to long term. A number of countries around the world, as I indicated, are moving toward nuclear. China is the gorilla in the room. They've committed to building out 150 reactors over the next 15 years. That's a massive build out. But not just there. England is looking toward building out. France, Japan, bringing reactors back online and potentially expanding the fleet. Finland, even here in the US, we're looking at some growth within the nuclear industry. A Southern company has 2 reactors, new reactors that they're going to be bringing on this year. There's just continued acceptance of nuclear power globally, and including here in the US. In the US, a lot of people don't realize we have the largest reactor fleet in the world. We still have 93 reactors up and running. We're seeing considerable support of those reactors from the US government through recent legislation designed to keep those reactors up and running and expanding their lifetime. And we're also seeing a lot of support from both Republicans and Democrats who fight on most everything, but when it comes to nuclear power, there's strong support. And there's legislation right now being considered in Congress designed to cut off the supply of material that's still coming in from Russia into the US. We're seeing a lot of interest from financial players like MMCap and other hedge funds. ETFs are being formed to invest in the industry. But the real game changer from the financial point of view was when Sprott developed the Physical Uranium Trust in July of 2021. Since they've developed that trust, they now have greater than 60 million pounds of physical uranium inventory that they've acquired. That is a one-way trust, which means they can buy those pounds, but they cannot put them back on the market. It's effectively a buy and hold mechanism. And when they are in the market, we feel it. We see the pressure on the price. But we can't talk about this without talking about geopolitics, because Russia is by far the largest refiner of uranium in the world. They don't mine very much, but they do refine. And because of that, the world has become very dependent on Russia for its supply of nuclear fuel, conversion and enrichment services. If that supply were to get cut off, which I suspect that it will over time, it's going to be very difficult for the Western world to replace that supply, simply because we don't have the physical infrastructure to be able to do that. So right now, countries around the world are looking at ways to replace that supply in case it gets cut off. The same is true from uranium supply. A lot of that is coming now out of Kazakhstan, which is an ally of Russia. They do appear to look like they're trying to distance themselves from Russia, but it's not clear that they will be able to overcome Russia's influence when it comes to uranium production and export. And if that uranium supply from Kazakhstan does get cut off, then it's going to have an immediate and significant impact on uranium prices very quickly. Here in the US, uranium production has declined to effectively zero because it's been very hard for us to compete with Russian and Kazakh state-owned suppliers of uranium. But that's where our company comes into the story. Our Lost Creek property is built out. It's producing now, and we're ramping it up to a greater production level. We have a great resource in the ground and a lot of area, which is about 35,000 acres that we can go in and explore, and we're optimistic we can find more pounds there. The average recovery rate in the in situ mining technique is only about 60 to 80%. But at Lost Creek, our average recovery rate over 9 years is at 90% recovery. So we've exceeded the norm, and that has led to some fantastic economics on the property. Economies of scale are important. In 2015, we reached our maximum production level of nearly 800,000 pounds on a per annum basis. And our production cost, C1 cash cost then, was a little over $16 a pound. That year, the all-in mine site cost was a little over 33. We're not going to be able to get back quite to those rates because of inflation, but we believe we can get very close. And to put that into context, the spot price today is right around $51 a pound. The long-term price is about $53 a pound. So at Shirley Basin, we believe it's going to be a little bit cheaper to mine there than at Lost Creek because the ore body is shallower and a lot of the infrastructure is built out. And we own a lot of that land, and so we're not paying royalties much on that or are encumbered by any other expenses there on that property. That is a brownfield property that was a former in situ mine, probably the first in situ mine in the world for uranium was located at that site back in 1963. So we're underway with a ramp up right now, ongoing drilling program in Header House 2-4 and 2-5, which are our next production areas. We've been hiring like crazy. We've gone from 9 people at the mine site in October of last year. Today, we've got 41 people. We still need to hire about 15. We've got an advanced purchasing program. We know that some equipment and materials are hard to get. So for over a year now, we've been well ahead of the curve, and we don't see that supply chain is going to interfere with us as we ramp up production. ESG is an important part of the nuclear story. And I won't go through the entire, all the points on ESG in the interest of time, but I would point out that if you look at the CO2 emissions that will be averted by burning the uranium from our Lost Creek and Shirley Basin project, compared to that would be burned at a coal-fired power plant, we're going to offset more than 300 million metric tons of CO2. That's the equivalent of taking 67 million cars off the road for 1 year. And we're very proud of that. It's an important part of our ESG story. UR Energy is well recognized in our industry here in the US as being a leader when it comes to research and development, technology evolution. We've had a number of great successes over the years, and we're followed on a number of projects by our peers. They mimic what we do. And late last year, we announced 2 more R&D programs. One of them is focused at a new well casing technology. We've completed phase 1 testing on that, and we're moving on to phase 2 testing this spring, and we'll have more to report on that. We're also working on a methodology to reduce water consumption through advanced filtration and treatment, and we hope to have more to report on that in the coming months. But taking a look at our market position, we're in a great place right now. Our last public disclosure, we had 37 million in cash in the bank. We just a few days ago, we closed an additional equity raise where we are grossing $46 million. And we also brought in a little over $6 million from that sale to the Department of Energy. So we are incredibly well cashed up right now. And that was quite intentional. We raised money when we didn't need it because we were able to get much better terms. And that allows us to move into the ramp up phase well cashed up. Otherwise, we would have started to run a little bit low on cash. It'll also help us as we look at M&A. We would really like to grow the company and looking for opportunities in that regard. And we wanted to enter that very well cashed up in a strong position. So market cap today is around $290 million. Fully diluted, we have about 242 million shares outstanding as of the 30th of September. That number is going to increase as we roll in the numbers from the equity raise that we just increased. But we've got great analyst coverage in the US and in Canada. And kind of the points to take away from the conversation here is we are extremely well cashed up. We have a proven project in Lost Creek, working toward ramping that up. We've got long-term contracts, revenue locked into place with that 600,000 pound a year contract book for the next 6 years. So great story, a great time to be jumping in. And with that, I'll pause and be glad to answer any questions that the listeners have.
Fantastic. John, my goodness, you guys have been busy.
We have been incredibly busy. Once we made that decision to ramp up in December, it was all hands on deck. We immediately began to increase the level of hiring. And it's been a very busy time. And with the equity raise as well, that's kept us very busy.
Yeah, the equity raise was icing on the cake in terms of busyness.
Yeah, absolutely. It takes a lot of time to accomplish those. Once you pull the trigger, it happens very quickly, but it takes a lot of lawyers, a lot of bankers, a lot of technical people, a lot of due diligence to put those to bed.
You must have been very pleased with a $46 million raise. Tell us how it went.
Yeah, it went very smoothly. Cantor was the lead banker on the deal. We had a 15% overage that was completely allotted. We could have easily raised a lot more. In fact, we had some large investors ask us if they could do more. And we held back and said, no, 46 million is what we're targeting. That's where we're going to close the book on that. But it was easy to go out and get that money for us. I think people understand that when it comes to uranium mining, we have some of the best assets in the US and certainly can compete with just about anybody globally as well. So making that raise was easy. We had a very reasonable discount on the share price on the raise. It was a 4% discount to VWAP. Which is fantastic. We were pleased with that. We threw in a half a warrant as well with a 3-year term on that and at $1.50. And so today our share price, we're trading at $1.08, $1.09, somewhere right in there. So all in all, we were very happy with how it turned out.
And where do you see that $46 million being spent, John?
Oh, we've got some good uses for it. It'll be dedicated toward ramp up initially. We already had a good cash position to see us a long ways through ramp up, but we were getting to the point where we were a little uncomfortable that we were going to get a little low on cash during ramp up before we started selling into those contracts and had revenue. And as you well know, the time to raise money is when you have money. If you wait until you're getting low on cash, the bankers know that, and you don't get very good rates. So our cash burn rate right now is fairly high, because we're aggressively pursuing the ramp up of mining. And so we wanted to go ahead and grab that money right now instead of waiting until later when we wouldn't get as good a rate. But again, we're looking at M&A. For a long time, we've been a relatively small but profitable producer with very good quality assets, but we would like to grow the company. We think nuclear power is got a very bright future. And we want to position the company to be able to realize that higher profit margins, higher production levels through not only exploration, but through M&A. And we believe that the M&A activities we saw in 2021, 22 will continue into 23. And we're hopeful that there will be some good quality assets that we can bring in using some of that cash we raised. And I guess I would comment there too, for those who are listening in. Over the years, we've been very reluctant to jump into acquisition because a lot of the assets that have been for sale have not been of the quality that we've been after. So we're going to continue to be very disciplined and only make acquisition when it's a quality asset that we believe we can bring into production in the near term and be profitable. If it doesn't tick those boxes, then we're not interested in making acquisitions. So we're going to continue to be disciplined in that regard.
So you think the story over the next few years might be one of consolidation in the uranium industry?
Yeah, I think that we're going to continue to see that, especially this year. I think as the price continues, the price of uranium continues to march upward, ultimately we're going to see a cessation on consolidation as people really have got the playing field laid out. They've got the assets they want. and they move into profitable production. But I think 23, we're going to continue to see consolidation as the price continues to march upward.
You've raised that 46 million with ease. Does that indicate that the uranium market is back, that investors are confident, and that the super cycle that has been regularly talked about is either imminent or has actually begun?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can speak about that on the micro and the macro. From the micro, we've got quality assets. We're a very well-known entity in the uranium space, very low cost of production, very high recovery rates. So in that regard, we're one of the prettiest girls at the dance. And we like to joke about that. So I think from that perspective, that made it easy to go out and get investment. But from the macro, there's so many reactors being built around the world. Demand is increasing with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. That has really caused nations around the world to look at other supplies of energy and come back to the nuclear story. Small modular reactors, I think, are going to become an increasingly important part of the story as well, as people look to build out smaller reactors that are more nimble, lower cost of capital. And I don't think we're going to see
in England, John. That's what's proposed here.
Yeah, absolutely. And not very far to my west here, Bill Gates has a company called TerraPower, and they've decided to build a reactor in Kimmerer, Wyoming, which is a very small town. It's got a coal-fired power plant. They're shutting down the coal-fired portion, but they're going to replace the coal-fired part with a nuclear power plant, but keep all of the infrastructure on the downhill side of that, so they reduce costs. So those are being looked at seriously around the world. And I don't think we see a tremendous demand for uranium in the next year or two or three. But as we start to look out 4, 5, 6 years from now, I think we're going to see hundreds, potentially even thousands of small modular reactors being built globally. And hopefully they can get that engineering perfected and keep those costs very low and add some meaningful carbon-free energy in that regard. But it's a great time to be in the space.
It sounds a bit facetious, but it's a serious thing. If Bill Gates, who, let's face it, is intent on saving the world, he's intent on saving the world with nuclear modular reactors.
Yeah, that's right. If he's got if he's leaning into this, he's supporting it with his pocketbook, with his
saving the world.
Lobbying ability. It's serious. He doesn't just take things up on a whim.
No, he's a very serious individual. Okay, Lost Creek. Tell me what's happening with Lost Creek mine in the coming years. What's the production schedule there?
So as we build out and we turn on flow, we'll be turning on additional flow here within a few weeks as we start up Header House 2, 4. And we're nearly ready to do that. We'll bring several hundred gallons a minute of processing fluid into the plant where we recover it. We do have the capacity at that plant to do everything we need to do. We don't toll process with anybody else. We'll take those pounds, recover them, do the chemical precipitation and the drying, and produce yellow cake that we sell to the conversion facility. But this year, as we ramp up, our objective is to produce between 200 and 300,000 pounds of uranium this year, because that's all the contracts call for. So we'll match production with the contract demand. Next year, that demand goes up to 600,000 pounds. So by the end of this year, it's our objective to be producing at a rate of 600 to 800,000 pounds on a per annum basis. And we'll hold it there, maybe produce a little bit of extra to sell into the spot market and build inventory. But that's our objective for production here in the next 1 to 2 years.
Okay, final question. You mentioned refining in Russia, that an awful lot of the refining takes place in Russia. So do you guys actually refine your own yellow cake, your own 308?
Yeah, we take it all the way through yellow cake. Here in the US, we send our product to a company called Converdyne in Metropolis, Illinois, and they continue the conversion process there. But yeah, we produce yellow cake. We compete directly with Kazakh production, and more indirectly, we compete with the Russians as they sell enriched uranium components.
Is it a business there, or is it too capital intensive to actually set up refining facilities? It's slightly a naive question, I suspect.
Yeah, I would love to jump into conversion, but it would take hundreds of millions, if not in the billions. And the enrichment is the same way. It would take billions of dollars to jump into those sectors. So right now we're very happy as uranium miners using the in situ technology, and that's where we plan to stay for now.
Again, it's me sounding like a daft boy, but someone's going to have to
Yeah.
at a policy level, don't you think?
No, it absolutely is going to happen. I think we're going to see first some expansion of existing capacity with companies like Converdyne and on the conversion side and Urenco on the enrichment side. But ultimately, that's probably not going to be enough. There needs to be new build, not just in the US, but in Europe and the Western world to replace that Russian supply. It has to happen. And it likely will only happen with some government assistance because Russian's material is so cheap. It's subsidized by their government. So if we're going to compete in the West, we're going to have some help from the government to be able to do that.
Oh, John, that was a fantastic half an hour well spent. Thank you so much for joining us. It was so interesting, and we have learned so much. Thank you so much for sparing the time with us.
Oh, thank you. It was good to talk with you.
And we're joined now by Gaius King, who is the resource analyst at Fox-Davies Capital. Okay, finally, it's Gaius King, an experienced resources analyst from Fox-Davies. As you can see from this chart, showing the prices of lithium carbonate, the lithium price has been steadily growing for 3 years and peaked in November, but now it's falling. What goes up must come down. Gaius has taken an overview of the global demand for battery cars for us and is going to talk us through the demand for battery EVs versus hybrids, what this means for lithium demand, and where it's going to all come from. Welcome, Gaius. I'm sure we're all absolutely fascinated to hear your views on this. Are you there, Gaius?
Yeah, I am, Donald. Thank you for your kind introduction.
No, I'm thoroughly looking forward to this. You may be last, but you're far from least, Gaius.
I hope so. Look,
no pressure.
That's right, no pressure. What I've tried to do is make this sort of quick, and we'll try and cover as much material as we can in the shortest period of time. So if do people see my first page?
Yes, we do. Don't you worry about that, guys.
Okay. So obviously this is the trends and growth and adoption of EVs globally. That's the main driver of lithium and where lithium demand is going to go. So if we go back to page 2, obviously that is what everyone's concentrating at the moment. Oh dear, the lithium price has fallen out of bed. The reasons why that has occurred is a bit nebulous. No one really knows. CATL have done some recent negotiations that have been at discounts. China always bought their lithium at a 20 to 30% discount to the Koreans and the Japanese. And we believe it's a temporary measure. So if we go to page 3, this is the real reason why we're quite bullish on lithium and more so going forward. If you look at this, obviously lithium is just coming off the top. It had a really massive run. It's got to come back. It's got to stabilize. That red line is our long-term price. We recently released a note on a company called Cleantech Lithium, which is a client of ours, and we used a long-term price of $22,000 a ton lithium carbonate equivalent, which is equivalent of about 157,000 yuan. Obviously, the current spot price is 380 odd thousand, so there's still plenty of margin left. If we go to page 4, you've probably seen these photos many times, and we would just merely say that if a technology that comes along is superior and it gives a better outcome, then adoption is very quick. And it doesn't matter whether that's refrigeration or penicillin or mobile phones or televisions. And what we have here is basically the difference between 1900 and 1913 looking along Main Street in New York. But before we can talk about lithium and vehicles that's driving it, if we go to page 5, this is one of those key projects that I love, and the diagram shows something probably surprising to many, is that car sales or vehicle sales globally are at the same level they were 18 years ago. Now in 2017, McKinsey came out and did a regression, and they suggested that by about 2030 we'd be selling roughly about 115 million cars a year. We're predicting that number will be about 30% lower at 80 million. And the reasons why that will occur, we'll jump into a little bit later. So if we go to page 6, and this just reiterates it, auto sales actually started declining 12 or 18 months globally before the recent pandemic. So the recent pandemic does not explain why vehicle sales have been falling. And it runs contrary to the grand narrative that the rise of China and India, which is very real, would bring on all these additional consumers and car sales would go through the roof. And actually at the time when McKinsey did that projection was considered very conservative. If we go to page 7, these are newly registered car sales in the UK on the left and the EU on the right. And as you can see, in the UK, car sales actually started declining from about 2017 onwards, and on the right in the EU from about early 2018 onwards. If we go to page 8, it wasn't just the UK or the EU, it was also in China. This is before the outbreak of COVID. Chinese car sales started declining for reasons, and you have to remember the economy was running plus 7% per annum. Now, there are a lot of reasons behind the scenes, and I won't complicate the picture just yet, but it is a little bit complicated when you talk about the Chinese car market. There are some specifics associated with that. But again, in the US had very comfortable growth. Car sales were falling. If we go to page 9, please. And this is what we call the invisible megatrend, that there are the rise of technologies has allowed people to basically eschew car ownership. And that's shown with, for instance, if you look at 18 to 30-year-olds, there's 40% less young people with car licenses than there were 2 decades ago. So it's basically allowing all sorts of people to use vehicles through apps, but not necessarily own them. And this is particularly important in Asia. If we'll jump into the next page, page 10, what does this page mean? On the left-hand side, what that's showing is that per vehicle in the car share scene, there are 200, on average, 210 customers per car sharing that individual car. And on the right-hand side, and this data is from Berkeley University, and I've used a projection. Unfortunately, they don't update anymore. On the right-hand side, that is growing at 50%, over 50% per annum. In Europe, it's less. For every customer with a car share provider, there's 1 car for every 100 plus customers, and it's growing at 20%, but it's not universal. If we go to page 12, in the US, there's only 25 customers per car with a car share provider, and the growth rate is, well, it was 7 or 8%, but I believe it's now around about 3 or 4%. So there are differences around the world. The US are not really interested in platforms that share vehicles. The next page, please, on page 13. But when you add up the world growth regions together, and there are other regions that I haven't included here just for keeping everything brief, we think that it'll have a negative impact on car sales between now and 2030 of 50 million vehicles as a collective. And to put that in perspective, Volkswagen and Toyota produce about 10 million vehicles each per annum. So page 14. And the large car makers have picked up on this. Toyota were actually the first one, and they started advertising a number of years ago saying, look, we are transferring car ownership to car use. So no longer do families have 2 cars parked in the driveway. You can, with their program, and Volvo and Porsche and a number of other car makers have jumped on board, where you can pay for a subscription. You can get a SUV 1 week, you can get an open top car the following week. And yes, the price might vary a little bit. And often these programs include insurance and delivery and the whole works, the maintenance. And that's where car ownership is going. Page 15. But what we're here to do is talk not necessarily about car ownership. We're talking about EVs, because EVs use lithium. And the biggest EV market in the world is China. And I've just updated these numbers. recently, and this is our projection to 2023. The growth rate is 21% this year. Obviously, it's been bouncing around, but the overall growth rate over the past 7 or 8 years is still averaging around about 85% compound. If we go to the next page, 16, and we look at Europe, we are still predicting substantial EV growth sales, but I have to preface that the way that these different regions report EV sales is not similar, and so we have to separate. We differentiate between battery electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and hybrids, and the reason why we do that will become evident very soon. And if we go to the US in the next page, 17, the growth rate is the lowest among the major regions. But what is particularly interesting about the US as compared with Europe is that the US buy battery electric vehicles or internal combustion engines. They don't buy hybrids. So comparing like regions with like regions is sometimes difficult. If we go to page 18, what I've done here is I've combined all 3 regions, and I've assumed that that accounts for roughly around about 66% of all the vehicles sold globally. And what that's showing is that the average growth rate in those 3 regions collectively, weighted average calculation, is around about 70% compound per annum. Obviously, that's dropping. It was only 22% last year. And we predict that there'll be 12 million EVs sold this coming year. In page 19, what we've tried to do is say, okay, where are we at in the adoption cycle? And what we have here on the right-hand side is a sigmoidal growth curve. Now, this thing is often observed in nature, whether there be lemming growth or the adoption of Nike Air shoes or whatever. And it's a relationship that you see from different sectors and different times. And what we roughly see there is that the current shape of our growth curve there matches what they term the growth stage. But what we did, if we go to page 20, is that we've put it against a curve that smooths out the data. This is a weighted average calculation, and it appears, and if you look at 2023, and that is our projection, in-house projection, it looks like that nominal growth is declining, not in, real growth is declining, not in nominal terms. So there'll be more electric vehicles sold, but the amount of growth in electric vehicles is starting to taper. So it suggests to us that we're either in the middle of the growth stage or we're approaching maturity. If we go to page 21, now this is Europe. So whenever you talk to an analyst, you should always be aware of their own biases. And my bias is I live in Europe. And I think Europe is a little bit ahead of the curve from other parts of the world. So whatever relationships, not strictly taken, but whatever relationships I see here should be applied elsewhere, ceteris paribus. So if we go back to 1990, 10%, 12% of the Europe's vehicles were diesel. And then they made tremendous advances in diesel efficiency. And it got to a point in 2008 to about 2011, 2012. Where about 50% of all the vehicles in Europe were diesels. But then, this is the interesting part, then a lot of research started coming out suggesting that actually diesels weren't great for the environment. Now, none of the governments moved against diesels, but people made the choice not to buy diesel vehicles anymore. And at the beginning of 2014, as you can see in those 2 blue colors, the dark blue is the hybrids, and what I call BEVs as battery electric vehicles, full electric vehicles. That's when the growth occurred. And you can see here that that growth is, almost exponential at a certain point, to the point there we were predicting this year that 53% of all vehicles sold in Europe will be battery electric vehicles. If we go to page 22. So how does this relate to lithium? Well, to generate a lithium demand into the future, we have to know how much lithium has been consumed in electric vehicles. And I'll demonstrate why that is the case in a little bit further. Page 23. Okay, so what we have here is some hard numbers, and what we've done is generated some tables. But obviously, I'm not demonstrating because that would bore you to tears, bored me to tears generating it in the first place. And basically, we split off the low end battery types and some of these very high end fast battery cars. And the average for a battery electric vehicle we found was around about 39 kilowatts. And a plug-in electric vehicle has about 25% of the battery of a battery electric vehicle. And then according to our collation of numbers, for a hybrid, it's about 5 kilowatt hours. So if we go to page 24, just to demonstrate what a massive effect it is. It's not good enough to know how many cars are going to be sold in the future. You also have to try and at least attempt to forecast how many types of electric vehicles are going to be sold in the future and what types they will be. So in the first scenario I've just highlighted here, and this just goes to demonstrate how high demand for a lithium could be. If 2.2 million vehicles sold in the UK were battery electric vehicles, it would account for 58% of all the world's current lithium consumption. One country, just its annual sales. And obviously our sales are only a fraction of what the world is. 2.2, it's, I think last year was about 62 or 63 million vehicles were sold. In the second scenario, it's a mixture, bit of battery electric, hybrids, and plug-in hybrids. It would be 19,000. And then if we just assume that all the vehicles in the UK were hybrids, it would only be 8,000. So there is a 640% variance just in the type of electric vehicles sold before you get into the number of cars sold. So if we go to page 25, so why is batteries important? Well, this diagram, hopefully it's easy to understand. I've reworked it a little bit. Up until 2014, and you can see in 2014, 28% of all the lithium consumed globally went into batteries. That was primarily 1.5 to 2.7 volt batteries going into things like calculators that were mostly disposable, into computers and whatever. From 2015 onwards, that's when the electric car revolution occurred. And the vast majority, we're predicting in, last year, 80% of all the world's lithium was consumed in batteries. The vast majority of that was into electric cars. So electric cars very much define how much lithium goes forward. So the lithium market is an EV market. And we use this model not only for lithium, but also for rare earths. So we have a vehicle demand model of which then we derive our commodity forecasts coming from that. Can I also say one point here is that every other segment, including glass and ceramics and lubricants, every segment using lithium has been growing all the time. So it's not just that everything's going into battery electric vehicles. Every segment is using more lithium. If we go to the next page, please. And just to show this, demonstrate the difference between a 20,000 tonne per annum lithium carbonate operation. Cleartech released, I think they'll go in a Verde scoping study suggesting that amount. So for one mine, it would either supply 145,000 electric cars, battery electric cars, or 1.1 million hybrids. What we have to do is determine how many of each and what proportion will be likely to occur. So if we go to page 27, what do we know? Just to recap, I know I'm rushing through this, but I don't want to bore you. What do we know so far? We know that car sharing is a major force, and it's forcing the number of sales globally to decline. We're probably at that plateau now, and we're expecting it to continue to grow for the rest of the decade. But it is a transition from car ownership to car use. We know that growth is reasonably predictable. I've just shown it against an exponential growth curve. And we think that 22.6%, obviously it doesn't matter if it's 22 or 24 or whatever, but we think roughly around the mid-20s of all cars sold this year will be electric vehicles of some type, including hybrids. Next page, please. 28. So according to that sigmoidal growth pattern, we seem to be into the mid to late growth stage. And it implies that actually EV growth will taper within the next 2 or 3 years. Next page, please. So the title should need explaining here. EV adoption is a political and not an economic narrative. These are hard targets that have been set by our respective governments. We're of the opinion at Fox-Davies that these will be relegated to want to be targets. I don't think, and we won't go into it so much today, but I think they will be aspirational targets. They won't be hard and fast because the technology is just not there. Page 30. So how widespread will our battery electric revolution be? We just make the point that battery electric vehicles are constrained by chemistry, not by political will, and you can't research chemistry away. The range that battery electric vehicles have today will be the range they will be tomorrow and the day after. There will be incremental increases and the batteries will get larger, but fundamentally chemistry can only go so far. So that's part of our narrative going forward, is that it's actually hybrids that are going to be the big adopter, not battery electric vehicles per se. If we go to page 31. This looks like, on first glance, that we're fine for lithium supply going forwards. Can I just make one point that is not immediately obvious in this diagram, is that the vast majority of supply that has come online has come from existing producers, not new projects. And in fact, those existing producers are hitting a hard roof of how much they can expand from going forward. There are some hard rock producers that are yet to come online in Australia, and there are a couple of new projects going in South America, but there is a dearth of new projects going forward. Page 32, and hopefully I'm keeping on time. These numbers are from 2019. This is just showing the size of global manufacturing prowess, for want of a better term. Can I say that the US in 2011 was the world's largest manufacturer? By 2019, that was the difference between the US and China. And we expect that number next year to be about 32% of global manufacturing within China. The last peak of the British Empire in the mid-1800s was just under 50%. So that, I think that's a natural sort of level maximum that you can get to. But basically, Europe is deindustrializing very, very quickly, particularly Germany. The US is starting to, but less quickly. Next page, please. Page 33. Where is the lithium coming from? Well, lithium's found in a number of places around the world. I don't want to dwell on the point because it's tedious and boring. But basically, it's either in the lakes, salars, excuse me, or hard rocks, in particular Australia. Now, all the hard rock mining in the world has to be processed through China. The Wall Street Journal have come out with a suggestion, obviously led by governments, in particular the US. They want all of Australia's lithium to be processed in Australia, which would fundamentally shake this entire market. But the reality of that is decades off, if it at all. The amount of energy you require is critical. Energy is just key, and China has plenty of energy. It has plenty of coal. Of the 8.5 billion tons of coal to be burnt this year, 4 billion of it will be out of China, and India will be close to 1 billion, and their consumption is racing far ahead. So they've got plenty of baseload cheap power, and you need that baseload cheap power to have an industrial base. If you don't have that baseload, your industry dies. And it's not just copper or rare earths or lithium, it's a bunch of other projects as well. If we go to page 34, and this just highlights, this is from the EU's own study. The EU's dependency on metal imports is somewhere between 75 and 100%.
We're running out of time, guys.
Sorry, was that Donald?
We're running out of time.
Oh, okay, I'll hurry up. Hopefully a couple more pages. This just basically shows that where our demand for lithium is going to go. I think that's a little bit high. Our estimate is a little bit lower than that. But basically, there are no lithium projects come online. There are existing projects and those under construction. But the question is, where is the lithium? But it's not just lithium, it's all the other commodities. And this is Europe, page 38. These are all these amazing gigafactories we're going to build in Europe to build these wonderful electric vehicles, of which not a single one has a primary lithium supply. Not a single one. If we go to the next page, please, number 39. And the current flaw in the analysis of this is that we expect lithium to be on the market. Actually, lithium is not traded on a secondary basis as between the primary producer and the supplier. There is an exchange been set up in Singapore. I don't think it's up and going yet, but basically it's saying if you don't have the primary source of lithium at the moment, then you have to go to China. Next page, please, to page 40. What does Europe do best? Well, Europe makes stuff. And in particular, it makes a lot of cars. And Europe has made this interesting choice of outlawing internal combustion engine cars, which they're very good at, by the way, and going to electric vehicles, but they don't have the source to make electric vehicles, whether it be rare earths, lithium, cobalt, none of it. They don't have any sources of resources. So if we go to page 41, please. So this is China's grand strategy. They're planning to be a major manufacturing superpower. We estimate they're around about 34% of global total at the moment and still growing. They have controlled, and in the past 15 years, they've gone out and bought out basically every lithium deposit they could globally. And
the hard rock can really only be processed in China anyway, and they've purposely gone out and cornered the market in a variety of commodities. If we go to the next page, please, last page. This is unfortunately the conclusion. If you don't have a resource, and if you don't, then whoever controls that resource controls your production. And lithium is very much in shortage globally. I've tried to keep this very brief. I'm sorry, I've flown through it. But that recent decline in lithium is only going to be temporary at best. Thank you.
Gaius, thank you so much indeed. Can I jump straight in and say China clearly aims to be the economic powerhouse of the 21st century. Great Britain was the powerhouse of the 19th, America the 20th, China the 21st. What are the advantages which drives China forwards?
Well, firstly, it's power. They have plenty of cheap power and spaceload power, but also they have a methodology. So that they've clearly, although they joined the World Trade Organization, they've eschewed it and they're going down a mercantilist route. What is mercantilism? And the greatest exponent of mercantilism, and mercantilism is an old thing, it's gone from Egypt to the Venetians to the Greeks. Basically, it's finding a resource, you take it back to your home place, you value add, and then you sell that value add to someone else. So a great example would be China with silk and the Great Silk Road. Europe wanted silk, and there was incredible money to be made, and hence the reason Marco Polo hit that way and the whole works. Britain perfected it. What they did is they had a bunch of colonies, and they secured resources, and they were not allowed to trade those resources.
What does that mean in the 21st century, Gaius, though? What does that mean in terms of lithium and all these other things?
Well, China owns the deposits.
And what does that mean for us in the West?
We're a bit late. In short, we're a bit late. Yeah. So, I mean, look, the thing about lithium is it can only be found in two areas. Obviously, there's South America, salars, and there's hard rock. So Australia has a lot of hard rock lithium. And if we get into real trouble, I'm sure Australia will come to the party and they'll start processing there. But there's a lot of energy, a lot of capex to build and process commodities. But commodities are geologically specific. You can't go out and find a copper deposit tomorrow if you're short of copper. Copper only occurs in certain parts around the world. So if you own those resources, and China have gone out and have purchased a number of resources globally, and they control those resources. So they control the means of production. Okay,
as you mentioned, as relations deteriorate with China, security of supply becomes a more urgent matter. Can we talk through the US-Australia piece in the Wall Street Journal that you were referencing? And what does that mean in Australia? Do we actually have the capital to build these processing plants? Do we have the political will to do it? Talk us through that, if you will.
I think there is a political will. I don't know whether there's the capital, and I don't know whether there's the expertise. If we just digress a little bit, and I'll come back to it. If we look at rare earths, everyone talks about rare earths, and there's a mild panic in some quarters about rare earths. And we know where some rare earths occur. But have you seen any rare earth projects being developed? I haven't. And the part of the problem is that there's a certain level of expertise.
One in South Africa.
Rainbow rare earths, Palabora.
Yeah, Palabora,
yeah. Interesting, but again, it's a fairly short, it's 15, 16 years. It doesn't supply. I didn't point it out, but one of the slides in my diagram there was about wind turbines. The neodymium praseodymium of rare earths can only come from China. There are rare earth deposits in Europe. They've made big announcements about rare earth deposits in Europe, but they're iron ore deposits. They have to be mined first as iron ore deposits before you liberate the rare earths. They're very, very low grade, probably never economic. And that's the same with lithium. There is no, what I haven't mentioned here is that China have gone out and bought a bunch of hard rock deposits in Africa, and we don't know what they're doing at the moment because it's off the market now and it's secrecy. But I think I know of 5 or 6 of those deposits have been currently been developed by China. Mm-hmm. But again, where are the rest of the lithium deposits to be developed?
Okay, let me take you back to the recent dip in the lithium price. Was that driven by a drop in demand from China, or a more global easing in demand for battery EVs and hybrids? And you were mentioning Qatar. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, Qatar's an interesting idea. It's the world's largest lithium company. 10 years ago, it didn't exist. It was created by the Chinese state to go out and secure lithium assets. That's its primary purpose. Now it's processing, now it's making batteries. So my argument would be, and you can see with Mercedes-Benz, they're about to, many are going to transfer all their battery manufacturing to China. Mercedes-Benz are going to potentially transfer all their battery manufacturing to China, because why would China sell you the lithium carbonate when they can sell you the batteries? And at the end of the day, why then would they sell you the batteries if they couldn't sell you the electric cars? So it's an ecosystem. It's an industrial ecosystem. When you lose that ecosystem, you lose the ability to do technological advancement and research, because there is no economic incentive to do so.
Okay, guys, you spend your time looking at listed lithium companies.
Yep.
In terms of lithium, where should the smart money go, do you think?
Well, I've already mentioned our clients. I won't mention that again, but Clean Tech, we chose them for a number of reasons, and we think they're massively undervalued. Realistically, and I know all their product goes to China, but you know, there's a Mineral Resources. I mean, that Pilbara Minerals, I think it was gone up 3,100% in the last 6 or 7 years. Pilbara Resources went up 7,100%. Now they're already in production, they're selling into China, but you know, some up and comings are probably including Core, Liontown, Independence, IGO. They do nickel and a bunch of other things, but they picked up.
What about the projects which are underway? I mean, people like ASX Resources. I mean, there's quite a few of them. What about the Atlantic Lithium? What about the future resources?
Yeah, Atlantic Lithium is real, and they've got a big deposit, and it will get into production. I'm trying to remember the name of the company that was in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They Australian ASX, was it AVZ or something like that? They found something really large, and this is a problem when you're in African countries, or a lot of countries. DRC are very much in China's pocket. They found a big deposit, and China have just given it to them, to the Chinese company, that is. And the Australian company, there's no recourse. So it's great to find these hard rock deposits elsewhere, but you know, China are going out purposely grabbing these resources. You know, the whole idea that we can buy and sell commodities in an open market, I think, is now fiction.
Okay, taking all that knowledge that you have and rolling it into the retail investor, what advice would you give to the retail investor? What are the strategic points for them to be looking at? How can they actually make money out of the knowledge that you have? Where are the right places for them to be putting their money? My final question.
Yep. And that's hard, because it really comes down to a technical evaluation of per company. There are plenty of lithium companies out there. Most will never get into production. The vast majority won't. And it's not dissimilar to the iron ore industry in 05 through to about 09. There were lots of iron ore companies. The ones that got in production, like you look at Fortescue Metals, you know, made 20,000% on a person's investment. So if you pick the right one, you're going to make a lot of money. It's the same applying with the lithium companies. They're still worthwhile exploring, but you have to have a global view of things. And I guess the sad, disappointing part from my perspective is that there isn't that many options here in the UK. You're going to have to look at Canada, but in particular Australians. I think the Australians are the best picks in the lithium sphere out there.
Yeah, Sigma Lithium, perhaps. Have you come across them?
Sorry, who? Sigma
in Brazil.
Yep. Yeah, again, their output, and I think they're under a takeover offer, aren't they? Their output is not going to change the world that much. So the Australian producers are ramping up. When you look at it was a Pilbara Minerals made 800 million free cash flow in a quarter. You know, these are incredibly cash flow generative. And the thing about these hard rock producers, they're not actually producing a carbonate or lithium. They're just producing something to 5-6% and then selling it to China. But the prices are just so much larger than what they're mining it for. Can I give you an example?
No, I'm afraid I'm.
No, all right, sorry. You have to stop me because I won't stop.
I'm going to have to stop you. We're 10 minutes over.
Sorry.
Okay,
apologise.
you've been a complete star, Gaius. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Gaius King, resource analyst, Fox-Davies Capital, to discuss lithium, EV batteries, and all else. My goodness, we've covered the world there. Thank you so much, Gaius. That was completely brilliant. We've learned a lot, and I'm sure that was really helpful for our audience. Sadly, that's it from us. After another great evening, thank you very much to all our speakers for joining us live from across the world, and to their support teams who are doing such a great job in getting us here. Not forgetting the entire London South East team and Captured World who do such a terrific job in getting us on air. Thank you one and all. And I'd like to say a special thanks to Jeff Burdett and the team at Red Cloud Financial Services, the Canadian broker who connect us to such high quality mining companies in North America. And finally, a huge thanks to you once again for being such a great audience. And we look forward to seeing you again on Tuesday, March the 28th, and we do it all over again. Good night, and do enjoy the rest of your evening.